Welcome to today's journey through one of the most extraordinary museums in the world. The Zeitz Museum of Contemporary Art Africa, located in Cape Town, South Africa, is more than just a museum. It's a symbol of transformation, African creativity, and the power of art to reshape history. From an abandoned grain silo to a global icon of contemporary art, this is the story of Zeitz MOCAA. The idea for the Zeitz Museum of Contemporary Art Africa started with one core belief. African art deserved a world-class stage of its own. For many years, African artists were noticed internationally but did not have a major museum dedicated to their work on the African continent itself. Their art was often displayed in European or American museums, far away from the cultures that inspired it. This bothered German businessman and art collector Johann Zeitz. Johann Zeitz was the former CEO of the sports brand Puma. He spent years traveling across Africa, collecting artworks and meeting artists. Over time, he built a large personal collection of contemporary African art, but he didn't want to keep these treasures hidden in private storage or galleries. He wanted the public to see them, especially the people of Africa, at the same time in Cape Town. The V&A waterfront, one of the most visited areas in South Africa, was looking for a way to transform the old, abandoned grain silo building that stood unused by the harbor. This building was historic, but it was falling apart and no longer useful. Instead of destroying it, they wanted to give it a new purpose. When Johann Zeitz and the V&A waterfront came together, a powerful idea was born. Turn this forgotten industrial silo into the largest museum of contemporary African art in the world. It would not just be a building filled with paintings and sculptures. It would be a place where African voices, stories, struggles, dreams, and futures could be seen and heard. Johann Zeitz agreed to donate his entire personal collection to this museum. He also helped fund the creation of the museum and became one of its main founders. But he insisted on one important condition. The museum must always focus on Africa and its artists. It should be run by Africans, for Africa, and represent the diversity of the continent. With this vision, the project officially began. It was not just about art, it was about identity, culture, and giving the African continent a museum that could stand proudly beside places like the Tate Modern in London or the Museum of Modern Art in New York. This dream became the foundation of Zeitz MOCAA, museum created not to copy Europe or America, but to show the world what Africa can create on its own terms. Long before it became a home for art, the Zeitz MOCAA building had a completely different purpose. It was originally a grain silo complex, built in 1921 at the Cape Town harbor. At that time, South Africa was one of the major grain exporters. The waterfront was a busy industrial zone filled with ships, workers, and heavy machinery. The silo stood as one of the tallest concrete structures in the city and was considered a symbol of industry and economic growth. The building itself was made up of 42 tall concrete tubes, each around 33 meters high, over 100 feet. These tubes stored thousands of tons of maize and wheat that were transported from farms across the country. The grain was poured into the top of the tubes, stored inside, and later loaded into ships waiting at the harbor. For decades, this silo worked like a beating heart, feeding the economy of South Africa. But as time passed, technology changed, and new modern storage systems replaced the old silo method. The building became outdated and was no longer needed. After years of use, by the late 20th century, the silos stopped operating completely. What was once full of life, sound, and movement became quiet and abandoned. The huge concrete tubes stood empty, covered in dust, and forgotten by most people who passed by. For many years, the silo stood at the waterfront like a sleeping giant too big to destroy, too expensive to fix, and too important to ignore. Some people thought it should be demolished. Others believed it was part of Cape Town's industrial history and should be saved, but no one knew how to use it. Then came a bold idea. What if this place of grain could become a place of imagination? When the Zeitz MOCAA project began, the team decided not to tear the silo down. They wanted to keep its original shape and respect its history. They believed that transforming something old into something meaningful was more powerful than building something new from nothing. This decision would become one of the most iconic parts of the museum's story. Architect Sir David Oj, known for designing buildings that connect history, culture, and identity, took on the challenge. He saw the silo not as a problem, but as an opportunity. Instead of removing the concrete tubes, he decided to carve into the mass, if sculpting a giant piece of stone. He studied the building, its geometry, and even the shape of a single grain kernel. Inspired by this, he created the design for the central atrium. Piece by piece, workers cut through the solid concrete tubes to form a massive, open heart in the center of the building. What was once dark, noisy, and industrial became a bright, open, cathedral-like space filled with light. The carved-out tubes revealed smooth curves and towering walls, almost like the inside of an ancient temple, but made of concrete instead of stone. The outside of the building was preserved to look like the original silo, keeping its industrial identity. But inside, it became something completely new, a sanctuary for art, history, and culture. Elevators and staircases were built inside the remaining tubes. Some silos were turned into galleries, some into storage rooms, and others were left untouched to show visitors the raw structure of the past. This transformation was not just about architecture, it was a symbolic act. A building once used to store grain, something that feeds bourgeois, now redesigned to store art, something that feeds minds and souls. The silo was no longer a place of labor but a place of creativity. It had been reborn. When people first walk into Zeitz MOCAA, they are often silent not because they are told to be quiet, but because the building itself takes their breath away. What used to be a cold, functional grain silo is now a space that feels like a cathedral built for art. Every inch of the structure has been carefully redesigned to balance the past and the present, industry and imagination. The most striking feature is the central atrium. This is the heart of the museum. It rises several floors high, carved out from the original concrete silos. The walls are smooth and curved, forming shapes inspired by the cross-section of a single grain kernel. If you look up, you see light streaming in from above, entering through glass panels in the roof. The light falls gently across the curved concrete walls, creating shadows and reflections that change throughout the day. Even though everything feels artistic and modern, the building still proudly shows its history. The concrete is not polished to hide its age. Instead, the rough textures, old marks, and imperfections are kept visible. You can still see the seams where the silo tubes once met. Some tubes are left untouched in their original form, standing next to the newly carved ones. It feels like walking inside a sculpture made from memory, time, and vision. There are more than 100 gallery rooms inside the museum, spread across 9 floors. Each gallery is different. Some are small and intimate, perfect for quiet pieces like drawings or photography. Others are huge and open, designed for large installations or sculptures. The thick concrete walls make the rooms naturally quiet, allowing visitors to focus deeply on each artwork. The original 42 silo tubes were used in creative ways. Some were hollowed out to become elevator shafts and spiral staircases. Others were kept solid as structural supports. A few were sliced open vertically so visitors can see what the inside of a silo looked like. Walking through the museum is like moving through history and modern design at the same time. One of the most impressive parts is the glass windows on the exterior. The round windows, called pillowed glass panels, bulge outward slightly, like bubbles frozen in place. These windows reflect the sunlight, clouds, and ocean views around the building. At night, they glow from the inside, making the museum look like a lantern standing by the harbor. The architecture of Zeitz MOCAA is not only about beauty, it is also smart and functional. The thick concrete tubes keep the building cool in summer and warm in winter, reducing the need for air conditioning. The design allows natural light in where it is needed but protects delicate artworks from direct sunlight. The museum also includes climate-controlled storage rooms, conservation labs, and spaces for presentations, research, and education. On the very top floor is the rooftop sculpture garden. From here, visitors can see Table Mountain, the Atlantic Ocean, the city skyline, and the harbor. Sculptures are placed in open air, surrounded by sky and sea breeze. This rooftop connects the museum to the land and nature around it, reminding visitors that art does not only live indoors. Zeitz MOCAA is more than a museum. Building it is an artwork itself. It shows how something designed for industry and machinery can be reborn as a place for creativity and inspiration. It honors Africa's past while making room for its future. The creation of Zeitz MOCAA was not just about building a museum. It was about answering a powerful question: where is the home for contemporary African art? For years, artworks by African artists were displayed and celebrated in galleries and museums around Europe and America, but not in Africa itself. Many African artists became famous overseas before their own people could see their work in person. This imbalance inspired the core purpose of Zeitz MOCAA, to create a world-class museum dedicated entirely to contemporary African art and the African diaspora. Located on African soil, open to African voices, Zeitz MOCAA's main mission is to collect, preserve, research, and exhibit contemporary art from Africa and its global diaspora. This includes artists living on the continent as well as those of African heritage living abroad. What makes it unique is that it focuses on the present and the future, not only traditional African art, but modern and thought-provoking works created by today's artists. At the heart of the museum's purpose is representation. For decades, African stories were told by outsiders. African art was often mislabeled, misunderstood, or shown in small ethnographic sections of Western museums, almost like historical artifacts rather than living expressions. Zeitz MOCAA was built to change that, to let African artists tell their own stories, in their own voices, on their own land. This purpose is seen in everything the museum does. The curators, researchers, and educators are mostly African or from the African diaspora. Exhibitions are designed to reflect different cultures, languages, histories, and perspectives from across the continent, from North Africa to Sub-Saharan Africa, from coastal communities to desert tribes, From urban centers like Lagos and Johannesburg to remote villages, the museum does not shy away from difficult topics. Many artworks discuss themes like colonial history, identity, race, gender, social inequality, politics, spirituality, and hope for the future. Instead of hiding from these realities, Zeitz MOCAA brings them to light through art. Art becomes a way to ask questions, challenge stereotypes, and spark conversations about what it means to be East African in a modern world. Another important part of the museum's purpose is preservation. Contemporary artworks can be fragile, made of fabric, video, sound, recycled materials, or even living plants. Zeitz MOCAA invests in conservation labs, climate-controlled storage, and expert staff to make sure these artworks survive for future generations. Education is also central to the museum's mission. Zeitz MOCAA believes that art should not be limited to wealthy collectors or tourists. It should belong to the people. That is why the museum offers workshops, school programs, internships for young artists, and free access for African citizens on certain days. It wants to inspire the next generation of African thinkers, creators, and storytellers. Zeitz MOCAA is Africa speaking in its own voice. It stands as a symbol of pride, cultural ownership, and creativity. Its purpose is not only to display art on walls, but to protect African heritage, challenge the way the world sees Africa, and give artists a platform to shape the future. NSID Zeitz MOCAA. The walls speak, but not with words. They speak through paintings, sculptures, photography, film, textile, art, digital installations, sound, light, and movement. Each artwork is a voice. Each artist is a storyteller, and every story comes from a different part of Africa or from African people living around the world. The museum features artists from countries like South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Ethiopia, Senegal, Zimbabwe, Angola, Egypt, and many more. It also includes artists from the African diaspora, people of African descent living in Europe, America, the Caribbean, and beyond. These artists create work that combines memory, culture, pain, hope, spirituality, and modern life. One of the most celebrated artists featured in the museum is El Anatsui from Ghana. He is known for creating giant, shimmering artworks using thousands of recycled bottle caps and metal pieces. From far away, his works look like golden tapestries or royal cloth. Up close, viewers see they are made from discarded materials, turning waste into beauty and history into art. Another powerful voice in the museum is South African artist Mary Sibande. Her sculptures and photographs often feature a fictional character named Sophia, a black domestic worker dressed in a royal blue Victorian gown. Through Sophie, Sibande tells a story about South African women, colonial pasts, and dreams of freedom. William Kentridge from South Africa is another major figure. His charcoal drawings and animated films explore themes of injustice, memory, and apartheid. His works are often black and white, blending reality with imagination, humor with sadness. Yinka Shani, a British-Nigerian artist, uses Dutch wax fabrica material strongly associated with African culture to dress mannequins in colonial-era clothing. His art questions identity, history, and what it means to belong to more than one culture. Ethapatra Ruga, a South African artist, uses performance, textiles, and bright colors to create fictional worlds where African identity is real. His work often includes characters wearing elaborate costumes made of balloons, beads, or fabric, exploring gender, sexuality, and fantasy. These are only a few among many artists in the museum. Others focus on photography, showing the daily lives of African people in cities or rural communities. Some use video to tell personal stories about migration, war, or family. Some work with traditional techniques like weaving or beadwork, but give them a modern twist. Others build sculptures from wood, glass, bones, plastic, or even sand. What makes the art in Zeitz MOCAA special is that it does not try to fit into one style or one story. It shows Africa as it truly is: diverse, complex, ancient, yet modern, painful, yet full of hope. Visitors move from one gallery to another and feel as if they are traveling across time and geography. Each artwork invites them to think, feel, question, and understand. For many of these artists, Zeitz MOCAA is not just a museum, it is a platform that gives them visibility and respect in their own continent and around the world. It allows artists to speak in their own voices, rather than being interpreted or filtered by others. It gives African creativity the recognition it has always deserved. Walking through Zeitz MOCAA is not just a visit to a museum, it is an emotional journey. Every floor, every corridor, every gallery feels like a different world. Some spaces are silent and peaceful. Others are vibrant, loud, and full of movement. The experience is designed to make you feel, think, question, and sometimes even lose yourself in the art. As you enter the museum, the first thing you see is the enormous atrium, tall, echoing, carved from concrete. It feels like stepping into a cathedral. Visitors often stop for a moment, looking up at the smooth, curved walls and the light pouring in from the glass ceiling. The sound changes here, Footsteps echo softly, whispers travel slowly, and everything feels calm, like the museum is inviting you to pause before exploring deeper. Each gallery inside the museum is carefully curated to create a mood or tell a story. Some rooms are dark, illuminated only by screens showing video art films about migration, identity, memories, or dreams. You hear voices speaking different languages, footsteps on sand, laughter, ocean waves, or even silence. These rooms pull you into the inner world of the artist. Other galleries are bright and filled with color. Walls display large paintings with bold brushstrokes, African-inspired patterns, futuristic imagery, or abstract shapes. Sculptures made of metal, fabric, wood, or recycled objects stand boldly in the center of the room. The bright light highlights every texture and shadow, because the building was originally a grain silo. The museum has many curved walls and round rooms. Some of the old silo tubes were left untouched, so you can step inside them and feel the cold concrete around you. Others were cut open to create long passageways that lead to surprising spaces. The architecture makes you feel like you are constantly discovering something new. In some parts of the museum, you may come across large installations, artworks that take up an entire room. These can include hanging sculptures, mirrors on the floor, walls covered in fabric, or rooms filled with sound. In one gallery, you might see a sculpture made entirely from red thread and beads hanging from the ceiling, moving slightly when someone walks past. In another, you might stand in front of a huge screen showing a slow-motion film of people walking across a desert. Photography is another major part of the museum experience. Some photographs show the realities of everyday life across Africa: children playing in streets, markets full of color, city lights at night, or women carrying water across fields. Others are more symbolic portraits painted with light and shadow, subjects dressed in futuristic or traditional clothing, photographs edited to look like dreams or memories. What makes Zeitz MOCAA especially unique is how close visitors can get to the art. There are no glass cases around most sculptures or paintings. You can walk around them, stand as close as you want, and see every detail: the wrinkles in fabric, the texture of recycled metal, or the brushstrokes on canvas. It feels personal and alive. Some galleries include interactive art, where the visitor becomes part of the artwork. For example, screens that react to movement, sound installations that change when you walk through them, or spaces where you are encouraged to write, draw, or leave a message. Moving between floors, the elevators and staircases add to the experience. The elevators are glass, rising through the old silo tubes, giving you a view of the museum's inner structure. The staircases curve and twist, guiding you to higher levels where more art waits to be discovered. By the time you reach the top floors, you begin to understand what makes Zeitz MOCAA powerful. It is not just a place to look at art, it is a place to feel. A place where Africa's past and future meet in silence, sound, light, and imagination. Zeitz MOCAA is not just a place where art is displayed, it is a place where art is shared, taught, and used to build community. From the very beginning, one of the museum's most important goals was to make art accessible to everyone, not only to tourists or wealthy visitors. The founders believed that African art should belong to the people of Africa, first especially to young people, students, and local communities who often feel disconnected from museums. Inside the museum, there is a special space called the Center for Art Education. This area is dedicated to learning, creativity, and hands-on activities. Every week, children from nearby schools visit the museum. Many of them are stepping into an art museum for the first time in their lives. Instead of simply walking through galleries, they sit at tables, touch materials, draw, paint, and create their own interpretations of the artworks they have seen. Workshops are designed to make art feel less intimidating and more like a language. Anyone can speak. Children are encouraged to ask questions like, "What do you see? How does it make you feel? Why do you think the artist created this?" Through these simple questions, the museum teaches children that art is not only about beauty, it's about thought, expression, and emotion. Zeitz MOCAA also offers programs for teenagers and university students. These include guided tours, debates about social issues shown in the artworks, photography workshops, and internships. Students can learn how art is curated, preserved, and exhibited. Some workshops are designed for future African curators, young people who will one day tell the story of African art to the world. Artists themselves are part of this educational mission. The museum hosts residencies where artists from different African countries live and work inside the museum for a period of time. Visitors can meet them, watch them create, and ask them questions. This creates a connection between the artist and the audience, something that most traditional museums do not offer. The museum also gives space for performances, poetry readings, music, film screenings, and public talks. These events attract local communities, writers, dancers, musicians, and activists. They turn the museum into a living cultural center, not a silent building full of objects, but a place full of voices and energy. To make art more accessible, the museum offers discounted or free entry on certain days, especially for African citizens, students, and local residents. This is very important in a country like South Africa, where many people cannot afford expensive museum tickets. By removing financial barriers, Zeitz MOCAA sends a clear message. This place is for everyone. Another important part of the museum's community work is outreach. Staff members visit schools, community centers, and rural areas to bring art to people who cannot travel to the museum. They carry materials, reproductions of artworks, and even digital tools to show exhibitions on screens. Their goal is to make people feel that art is not far away. It lives in their stories, streets, and homes. At the heart of all of this is one belief: art has the power to educate, heal, unite, and inspire. Zeitz MOCAA is not only preserving African art, it is planting seeds of creativity in the minds of young Africans, giving them the tools to imagine a different future. The very top of Zeitz MOCAA, far above the galleries and carved concrete walls, lies one of the museum's most breathtaking spaces, the rooftop terrace and sculpture garden. It is a place where art meets the sky, where the city, ocean, and mountains become part of the museum experience. As visitors step out of the elevator onto the rooftop, the first thing they notice is the open space and fresh air. The view stretches in all directions. On one side, the calm blue water of the Atlantic Ocean touches the historic harbor of Cape Town. Ships move slowly in the distance, and seagulls fly above. On the other side, the iconic Table Mountain rises proudly, its flat top covered by a thin layer of clouds locals call the tablecloth. Beneath the mountain, the colorful houses of the Biokop neighborhood and the modern skyscrapers of the city create a beautiful contrast. The rooftop is not just a viewpoint, it is also an outdoor gallery. Large sculptures stand across the terrace, each one carefully placed to interact with the sky, wind, and sunlight. Some sculptures are made of metal, shining brightly in the sun. Others are made of stone, wood, or recycled materials. With no walls around them, the sculptures feel alive, changing with the weather and the movement of the clouds. One sculpture might represent a human figure, tall, abstract, and powerful. Another might be inspired by African traditions, using natural elements like bones, clay, or woven grass. Modern pieces made from scrap metal or discarded objects show how artists transform everyday materials into something meaningful. The open-air setting allows visitors to walk around each sculpture, see it from every angle, and even feel the texture with their hands, if allowed. The rooftop also includes a stylish cafe where visitors can sit with a drink or meal while enjoying the spectacular views. Glass walls protect guests from the wind, but still allow them to feel connected to the scenery. The cafe often becomes a place where artists, tourists, students, and locals sit together, relax, and talk about the art they have seen inside the museum. On clear evenings, the rooftop transforms again. The setting sun casts long orange and golden shadows over the sculptures. The sky turns pink, purple, and finally dark blue as the city lights begin to glow below. Sometimes, the museum hosts special events, here sunset concerts, poetry nights, or artist talks under the stars. During these events, the rooftop becomes more than a museum space. It becomes a cultural stage surrounded by nature and architecture. The combination of art and landscape makes this rooftop unique. Unlike traditional museum rooms with walls and ceilings, here the sky is the ceiling, and the horizon is the wall. Visitors often take photographs not only of the sculptures but also of the mountains, water, and city skyline. For many people, standing on this rooftop is one of the most memorable parts of their museum visit. Through this rooftop and sculpture garden, Zeitz MOCAA shows that art is not limited to indoor galleries. It can live in open air, breathe with the wind, and exist in harmony with the natural world. It is a reminder that creativity has no boundaries. It rises as high as the sky above Cape Town. When Zeitz MOCAA opened its doors in September 2017, it marked a historic moment not just for South Africa but for the entire African continent. It was the first major museum in Africa dedicated entirely to contemporary African art, and it immediately caught the attention of the world. What had once been an abandoned grain silo was now a powerful symbol of African creativity, resilience, and global presence. From the very beginning, international art critics, historians, and travelers praised the museum. Leading global media outlets like the New York Times, CNN, BBC, and Time magazine called it one of the most significant cultural openings of the 21st century. It was often described as Africa's Tate Modern, or the MoMA of Africa, meaning it was being compared to some of the greatest museums in the world. Many believed it had the power to change how the world sees African art, not as something belonging to the past, but as a vibrant part of the present and future. One of the museum's biggest impacts has been on African artists themselves. Before Zeitz MOCAA, many contemporary African artists had to leave their countries to find recognition in Europe or America. Now, they had a prestigious platform on their own continent. Artists from Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Ethiopia, Morocco, and many other nations began showcasing their work in a world-class space without having to cross oceans for validation. This created a sense of pride, ownership, and confidence. Young African artists visiting the museum could now dream of having their works displayed there someday. For many, it became a place of inspiration, proof that African art deserves respect and celebration on a global scale. The museum also started forming partnerships with international galleries, universities, and cultural institutions. Art collectors from different countries traveled to Cape Town to discover new talent. Exhibitions from Zeitz MOCAA sometimes traveled to other parts of the world, helping global audiences understand modern Africa through its artists, not just through news headlines or stereotypes. Awards and honors followed. Architectural organizations celebrated Thomas Heatherwick's innovative transformation of the silo building. Cultural groups recognized the museum's commitment to decolonizing art and giving power back to African voices. It became a member of international museum networks and hosted conferences where curators and scholars discussed African art's future. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the people of Africa. Visitors from townships, rural areas, and cities came to the museum and saw themselves represented in the artwork. Stories of identity, history, colonization, love, music, migration, and dreams. Many people said it felt like the museum was telling their story. Schools and universities began including visits to Zeitz MOCAA in their education programs. Students who had never entered a museum before were now walking through its grand halls, learning that art is not just something found in Europe, it is something they can create, study, and be proud of. Financially and culturally, the museum also helped Cape Town. It attracted tourists from around the world, boosting the local economy and turning the V&A waterfront into an even more vibrant destination. Local businesses, restaurants, and hotels benefited from increased tourism linked to the museum. In just a few years, Zeitz MOCAA achieved something powerful. It placed contemporary African art on the global map and proved that Africa is not just a place of ancient history and wildlife. It is a land of innovation, vision, and creative pioneers. Zeitz MOCAA is more than a museum. It is a story of transformation, not only of a building, but of perception, culture, and identity. The journey from a 1921 grain silo to a world-class contemporary art museum mirrors Africa's own story, a place with a complex history, rich heritage, and a powerful creative future. What was once a utilitarian industrial structure designed solely for storing grain has become a living, breathing space for imagination, expression, and dialogue. This transformation is both physical and symbolic. Physically, the concrete silos were carved, reshaped, and illuminated to create a cathedral-like interior where light, shadow, and space interact beautifully with art. Symbolically, the building reflects the evolution of African art itself, from being overlooked or undervalued to being recognized and celebrated globally. The museum turns what was once functional and industrial into something poetic, emotional, and inspiring. Inside Zeitz MOCAA, every detail tells a story of change. The curved atrium represents growth and potential, while the preserved raw concrete hints at history and resilience. The rooftop sculpture garden connects the city, the ocean, and the sky with the museum, reminding visitors that art is not confined to walls. It interacts with the world around it. Every gallery, installation, and sculpture contributes to a broader conversation about identity, history, and the future of Africa. But transformation does not stop at the building. Zeitz MOCAA transforms communities by prioritizing education, access, and local engagement. The museum nurtures young African artists, curators, and visitors. It transforms perceptions, showing both Africans and the world that contemporary African art is vibrant, diverse, innovative, and essential to global culture. The museum demonstrates that Africa is not only a source of historical artifacts but a center of creativity, experimentation, and new ideas. The transformation also extends to the global art world. Zeitz MOCAA challenges the traditional narrative of where important art should be displayed. It confronts the idea that Western museums are the ultimate authority on contemporary art. By giving African artists a prestigious platform in Africa itself, it changes the center of gravity for how the world views African creativity. Artists gain recognition, communities gain pride, and the continent asserts its place in global culture on its own terms. Visitors often leave Zeitz MOCAA with a renewed sense of possibility. They see a building that was once abandoned, now full of life. They experience artworks that speak of resilience, identity, and imagination. They leave understanding that transformation is not just physical, it is cultural, social, and emotional. Zeitz MOCAA is a beacon, showing that through vision, creativity, and respect for history, something old can become extraordinary. In the end, Zeitz MOCAA stands as a symbol, Africa taking its voice, its stories, and its art, and placing them at the center of the world stage. It reminds everyone who enters its halls that transformation is always possible, whether of a building, a city, a culture, or an idea. As we leave Zeitz, it becomes clear that this museum is more than just a building or a collection of artworks. It is a living story of history, creativity, and transformation. From the massive concrete silos that once stored grain, to the cathedral-like atrium filled with light, to the galleries that echo with the voices of African artists. Zeitz MOCAA reminds us that art can reshape not only spaces but also minds and societies. For visitors, the experience is unforgettable. Standing in the central atrium, looking up at the soaring curves of carved concrete, or walking through galleries filled with vibrant paintings, sculptures, and installations, you feel the weight of history and the excitement of the future simultaneously. The rooftop garden offers a final moment of reflection, where Table Mountain, the Atlantic Ocean, and the city of Cape Town frame a perfect view of the world as a canvas. Zeitz MOCAA teaches us that art is a language that transcends borders. It celebrates African creativity on its own terms and invites the world to listen, learn, and engage. The museum is a reminder that Africa's stories belong to Africa first, but they are also meant to be shared with the entire world. It empowers artists, inspires communities, and educates generations, proving that a single vision like transforming a silo into a museum can have a ripple effect far beyond its walls. So whether you are an art lover, a traveler, a student, or simply someone curious about the power of culture, Zeitz MOCAA offers a journey like no other. It is a place to witness the intersection of history, architecture, and contemporary creativity. It is a place to stand in awe, to question, to feel, and to be inspired. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Zeitz MOCAA. If you enjoyed this exploration, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with others. And the next time you are in Cape Town, make sure to step inside this extraordinary museum and experience its magic for yourself.